I am Cheryl Grant. Welcome to our first Playlist for Learning Challenge webinar on badges, produced on behalf of the 6th Digital Media and Learning Competition, which is administered by Haystack with support from the MacArthur Foundation. I am Cheryl Grant. I'm Director of Social Networking for the DML competition, and I'll be your host for the next 25 minutes. Before I introduce our guests, I want to let people know that you can participate and ask questions throughout the webinar. If you have questions for us, ask them in the chat window in the Zoom platform, and we'll do our best to fit them into the 30 minutes or the 60 minutes we have today. For those of you who have very specific questions about your application, I just want to remind people that we cannot provide specific feedback on your individual proposals that are in process, but we'll be able to answer general questions about playlists and playlist design in regards to badges. We do have also, if people have been following along some of our past events, we do have archived events from past webinars that Mandy has just put into the chat box, and some other resources. And we have some upcoming office hours. So these will be a slightly different format. If you run our earlier office hours, it will be the same, but they will be a half an hour, 30 minutes. The next one is April 27th from 12 to 12:30 Eastern Time. And then we'll have our third and probably our final office hour scheduled for May 5th. I think that's a Thursday from 1:30 to 2. So hopefully if people have questions, if you do have questions during this webinar today that are specific to the competition process, and we don't have questions for you because we don't have David Goldberg here with us, we will we'll save those for our next webinar. And all of these webinars will be archived, and the recordings, we try to get them up, barring unforeseen circumstances. We will have them up as soon as possible and share those out through social media as well as the listservs that we send out all of our announcements. So with that out of the way, we're talking today about Playlist for Learning and badges, playlist design with badges. And we're talking with our guest, Tim Cook, Partner Project Manager at LRNG, and Gurley Dela Cruz, who's Senior Research Associate with LRNG and an expert on assessment. So we've got two really expert people here to guide us through this today. And I also want to point out that we have a lot of resources, including the LRNG handbook, player handbook, that is in the, or partner handbook, sorry, that is in the chat box for anybody who wants to check that out in case you're just calling in by phone and can't see the screen. So please feel free to add your questions. And to begin, let's start with a short demo of the LRNG platform that Tim is going to share with us.
Cool, let's do it. Just going to pull up my screen share here. Cool. Can you guys see the content manager?
I can see it.
Perfect. All right, so just to talk a little bit about how badges work on the actual LRNG platform, which will be at least one place where the content you create for the DML playlist competition will be published. So to give you a little bit of a walkthrough here, the sort of main way that badges function on the platform is in the context of the learning playlist, all right? So we'll take a look here. The content manager tool that I'm in that you see is sort of where you're building all the different types of content. So you can build digital learning experiences, local learning experiences, badges, and playlists. Once you've created a playlist, it'll look a little bit something like this. You can have a feature video in the banner at the top of the playlist. You can have a description, some interest categories, the age, right, and then sort of step through all of the different learning experiences that are contained within your playlist. And then the badge is the sort of summative achievement that comes at the end of the playlist. The content I'm showing you is from one of our national partners, Gap Incorporated. So this is a playlist that we work with them to create that's around a number of workforce development skills. So you see there's sort of 10 XPs here, different learning experiences that are stitched together into a narrative, which this video at the beginning sort of kicks off, right? And so the playlist is called Business. So as you step through all the different XPs, as a learner, you're able to show and prove and submit evidence in order to complete each XP. And then once you've completed every single XP in the business playlist that's required, you're able to submit for the badge at the end. So here's a quick view of the badge, but you can click Learn More and see a lot more details of the badge itself, and then also see to go back to the playlist that it's related to.
Hey, Tim, we're getting some feedback from people that it's still on the Content Manager page on our screen.
Tim, maybe we could try to have you release the screen share and then restart it. See if we can catch it.
Might have frozen. Cool. Can you guys see the badge screen now?
Mm-hmm. I think that's what we're looking at. Yeah, design your future.
Cool. So you were not able to see the playlist screen, or was it just for some of the people on the call?
I think everybody was able to see Content Manager. So this page that you're on right now is seemed to be where it got stuck.
Okay, interesting. All right, so yeah, maybe I'll just sort of rewind a little bit. So Content Manager, as I mentioned, is where you're designing and creating all of your content, the different XPs, badges, and playlists. And then what I was showing was an actual sort of playlist view. So from the manager here, we can see all the playlists that we published, including this one here. Video banner at the top, all the different XPs that I mentioned sort of stepping through, and then the badge at the end. So since we're mostly talking about badges today, I think is sort of the theme of the call. This is what the badge page currently looks like, and that you can set the issuer, description of the badge, the specific criteria that's required to complete the badge. You can map it to a specific competency, and then, of course, link it to a playlist. And again, just to sort of show off, right, every single badge on the LRNG platform is linked to a playlist. So in the vast majority of learning experiences on the platform, if you're earning a badge, you're doing it by completing all of the XPs within a playlist and then submitting the cumulative evidence from all of those XPs in order to earn the badge that's at the end of the playlist. And that's the bulk of the demo. Maybe I'll step through really quickly a little bit on the badge builder side, right? So the content manager that you're seeing here is the administrative side of the platform. All of your content can be either archived in draft form or published live on the platform. When it's still in draft form, you can create new content or edit it. You can pick out a custom badge image here. We also provide a nice template, which includes a lot of pre-made image and visual design files to help you create a nice badge image pretty easily. Title, interest category, age appropriateness, the learning level, description, and then all of the additional data. One thing I'll call out that's kind of an important difference or sort of an emphasis on the LRNG platform is this idea that badges can unlock opportunities, right? So we have this very primary field at the bottom of the badge builder where you can call out some specific reward or opportunity that the learner gains access to if they complete the playlist and earn the badge at the end of the playlist. So this opportunity field is actually something that we're going to be spending a lot of time as a development team working on over the next 3 to 6 months, really building out sort of an opportunity system so that whenever a learner is completes a badge, not only can they read about the opportunity that's unlocked for them, but there's actually a number of sort of automatic notifications and sort of a bunch of actions that go into effect as soon as they complete the badge to make sure they're getting access to that opportunity. Gurley can probably talk more about this in a bit, but the opportunities can be things like free software or like very simple sort of rewards that you could get by completing the badge, or it could be something as valuable or advanced as like an employment opportunity, access to an internship, things like that. So
Tim,
that's,
we have one question that might fit in right where you're at. Can you show how the badge actually clicks through to user evidence in this demo?
yes. So I was going to show that next, actually. So the user evidence and sort of the assessment part of the platform, since we haven't launched the full live version of the platform yet until just before the summer, that is a piece of functionality that we're currently working on. So let me share out a screen that will be a great look into the fuller sort of badge assertion page, right? So fun thing to call out about badges is that badges actually have two very distinct parts to them. There's the badge class, which is the idea of the badge that can be earned by the learner. And there's the badge assertion, which is the specific, unique badge that has been earned by the learner and contains all the evidence that they've submitted for the badge. We've done a lot of thinking about how to really level up that evidence side of the work and make sure that badges are not sort of empty, right? So that when you earn the badge and you have it showcased in your portfolio, if someone clicks through the badge image, they don't just see sort of a list of description criteria, but they can also see a really robust sort of multimedia view of all of the content that you've submitted to earn the badge. So this is a sort of a product screenshot of the functionality that we'll have on that badge assertion page, the earned badge page that will be in the learner's portfolio. So it'll have that sort of basic detail at the top that I showed already, but then we'll also have this date earned up in the corner, as well as an entire library of submitted work for all of the evidence that they've submitted to earn their badge, right? So you can imagine if there was a playlist that resulted in a badge and the playlist had 8 to 10 experiences as part of it, there would be at least 8 to 10 different pieces of evidence, one for each experience or more, that would be part of the badge assertion page here, the earned badge page. So a rich multimedia portfolio of all the learning artifacts that were submitted by the learner are embedded in every single earned badge page. And here's the view of that page. Cool, and so I'll stop there. But just to summarize, the gist of it is that you have a playlist where you stitch together a number of learning experiences. The playlist results in the badge. We can customize a lot of the information, including the opportunity that the badge unlocks. And then as a learner, when you're earning the badge, you step through each of the experiences in the playlist, completing that experience, submitting evidence that matches up to each experience. And then once you've completed all of the experiences, the XPs in the playlist, you can submit to earn the badge. An assessor would look at all of your cumulative submissions, decide whether you've earned the badge or not, and then issue the badge, which results in that earned badge page. We have a rich portfolio of multimedia evidence that's related to the badge that you've earned.
Thanks, Tim. I'm not trying to call favorites here, but Mark Lesser has been asking 2 questions that seem very relevant to exactly what you're talking about. So Mark, I'm gonna float your other question to the top here, which is if we can see an individual experience page, and this might help with proposal writing.
Yeah. So I'll just flip back over here to the view of the business playlist. Yeah, so each of the different XPs, I'll load up a couple here. Again, they have sort of this beautiful sort of full-size banner at the top. Very practically speaking, in terms of your content creation and as you're designing the playlist and the XPs within it, having rich media assets is definitely a significant requirement, at least on our platform, right? Really sort of focused on the youth engagement aspect of the work and making sure that everything is beautiful, attractive, really visually engaging. So we have not only video banners, right, for some of the content, like you saw the video banner here at the start of the playlist, but then also like these very sort of rich, full width, high definition photographs at the top of each XP. So the XPs are often like pretty small chunks, in order to maintain user engagement, like youth engagement as well. So here, this one's called The Real You. You step through, it talks about, your personality has a direct relation to the types of jobs that are best for you. And it's a brief experience where you walk through a personality test and see how your personality matches up with different types of careers that you could have. Each XP you can also link to some related resources, like you can combine your personality test with a video game. You can try a different test if you didn't like that first one or you want to go on and do more. And then again, there's this sort of show and prove section at the bottom of each XP as well, where it tells you exactly what you need to submit in order to complete the XP.
Great. Mark, I hope that answered your question. Follow up if you have another question to clarify. And while you have your screen open, Tim, maybe you can also answer this other question. Oh, smiley face from Mark, so we're 2 thumbs up. Jose, a former grantee, so hello, Jose. Can a badge make reference to only some of the evidence, the main ones?
Can a badge make reference to only some of the evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of all of the evidence that was submitted?
So I guess you are choosing what of the submitted evidence you want included in the badge.
So I guess 2 answers there. So the learner, say, submits 12 pieces of evidence for 12 experiences that were part of the playlist for the 1 badge that comes at the end of the playlist. When the assessor is reviewing all of the evidence that was submitted for the badges, the assessor can ask them to resubmit if they don't think that some of the evidence was up to par and it didn't meet the criteria to earn the badge. So if, say, 8 out of the 12 pieces of evidence were good, but 4 of them weren't, the assessor could say, yeah, you're doing pretty well, but please resubmit these 4 items to sort of try again. So there's that option, there's that possibility. There's also the option for some of the, I can actually screen share here again to show you a little bit of the playlist builder. So within the playlist builder, right, if we go back to the content manager and we go to playlists, we'll actually create a new playlist. You have the ability within your playlist, right, not to drag and drop all the different XPs that you want to be part of your playlist, but you can also mark some of them as optional. So that maybe answers your question to some degree as well, is that, you could have required evidence submission for, 6 out of the 8 XPs in the playlist, or however many you want, so that some evidence was not required in order to earn the badge that was associated with the playlist. A final way to answer that question is that as a learner, whenever I am showcasing my portfolio to the public, right? The portfolio contains not only all of my badges, but all of my learning artifacts as well. When I'm publishing my public portfolio as a learner, I will have the ability to curate exactly what pieces of that portfolio I will be showing to the public. So you could decide as a learner that you didn't want to show off all of your learning artifacts. You only wanted to show off certain ones that were very exemplary, or certain ones that matched up with the type of career that you're aiming towards, right? To sort of tailor your portfolio in a specific theme or direction. So yeah, a number of ways to answer the question. You can have optional XPs. As a learner, you can curate your portfolio, etc. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Tim. I do want to remind people that if you were able to go to our earlier webinar, I think this distinction was made kind of at the top, and I probably should have done a better job doing this, that the competition is separate from the LRNG platform in the sense that you are required to put your content on LRNG. However, the competition criteria that's stated on the website is a little bit separate. So for example, LRNG is really focused on youth right now, and we do say that our competition criteria is for all ages, understanding that some people will be developing playlists in addition to LRNG on their own sites or elsewhere. So I just want to make that distinction that the badges, this is for helping people understand how it works on LRNG, and that you're going to have to split your mind a little bit as you think about the proposal, and look at the criteria very closely and think about them in that way as well. So my short announcement is over, and I'll move through the questions again. I do want to say also that I'm going to go through the questions that people are putting in the chat, so that we are going to give preference to the people who are here. There are some other questions that people have given to us in advance, and if we don't get to those during the hour, I may share those with Gurley and Tim afterward, and we can put those in the archive below this recording so that everybody sees all the questions and gets their questions answered. So the next question I'm going to ask is from Leslie. Leslie asked, do we have to use LRNG templates, or can groups design their own badges? I hope that what I said earlier about the competition being a little bit different helps to answer that somewhat. But Tim, if you want to comment on that, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I assume the question is about the visual design of the badge image. The template that we provide is just a resource to help with badge image design, but you're certainly welcome to design whatever badge image you want and upload it.
And Leslie, if you have any follow-ups, just let us know in the chat and we can circle back to that. The next question is from Anne. The question is, will employers or post-secondary institutions have the ability to reach students that have earned certain badges for recruitment purposes? We hope.
Right. I'll jump in. One of the things that we're trying to do at LRNG, we're in talks with trying to figure out how to get our badges available, for instance, on the LinkedIn profile. So that might be one way. But I would also say that might be something you may want to work on, possibly with your local institutions if possible, to see if there can be some direct communication for how they can access the badges and the students who actually earn them.
Great, thank you. We have another question here from Edge. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. Are these XPs still city specific? And this is one of those questions that it is a little bit different for the competition. For the competition, XPs do not have to be city specific. They can be digital. They don't have to be based in a local setting. And I don't know, Tim and Gurley, if I answer and you want to clarify, just jump in there and let us know. And then the next question here is Anna Maria, who asks, different items may speak to slightly different competencies. Could a badge be associated with a competency and not a playlist? That way I could pick only the pieces of my portfolio that speak to that competency. That's a good question. Either of you would like to comment on that? It's a very broad badge question, I think.
So I'm not sure I understand the question perfectly, but we do allow, as Tim showed in the badge builder, that you can map or specify which competencies are aligned to your badge. I'm not sure if Anna Maria's question is, can I filter or create a portfolio according to competencies versus playlists? In that case, I would defer to Tim about whether that functionality would be available moving forward.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand the question. Maybe if they could reiterate.
And maybe I just looked at it and saw it from a more simple perspective. I assume that if you want the evidence to be associated with a competency and not with the completion of a playlist. So for example, if there are experiences in the playlist that are not necessarily about working toward this competency, can you have a badge that speaks to competencies across several playlists? Maybe it just shows up in a couple different places in a playlist, in several playlists. So it's really about how do you want to design your badge? What is it that you want to recognize, and can you do it across multiple playlists? Is that Anna Maria? Okay, yes, I'm getting a affirmative from Anna Maria.
So the way that the platform supports badges and playlists right now is that a badge is earned as the sort of summative achievement at the end of a playlist. So you couldn't distribute the things that you had to learn across multiple fragments of different playlists, which I think is what the proposal is. So it is sort of more simple than that, the way the structure is set up, in that one badge is sort of linked to one playlist. Potentially, you could create a badge and link it to multiple playlists, right? Like you could create 4 different playlists and have all of those sort of linked to the same badge. You could have different routes on how to achieve that badge. Potentially, taking sort of different pathways towards the same achievement. The other thing I'll mention is that competencies and sort of aligning to competencies is something that happens at the badge level, since the badge is the place on the platform that we sort of do assessment and we sort of call out the learning achievements. So competencies are not tied to specific learner evidence or specific experiences, since there isn't any assessment that's happening until you actually get to the badge itself. So competencies are only mapped to badges.
And Mark Lesser is also chiming in to clarify his interpretation of the question is whether all badges are macro, in the sense that you don't have anything to show for going halfway down the road of a playlist. And I just want to reiterate that these are some very broad badge design questions that probably have some affordances with how they work with LRNG, and to really go and look at the criteria for the competition to make sure as you're putting your proposal together that you're not getting lost in the weeds. So they do have to work on LRNG, and I know that there are some one of the questions, I'm going to read it right now because it seems like it might help. This one person asks, let me see, am I missing something? The badge seems like the easiest part. When I look for information online, it seems like a lot of discussion, and I come away thinking maybe there's more here that I'm just not seeing. We can create a badge using the LRNG platform, and students submit evidence to show they have earned the badge, and then they've earned it with a question mark. And so I think, yes, if you are not familiar with badge system design and you just want your proposal to work well with the LRNG system, I do think it could be quite simple. There are some organizations who already have some badge system designs, and they're trying to figure out how their system should speak to the LRNG. And I think there's a little bit more iteration going on to figure out how that's going to sync up together. So there's some slightly different conversations. One is a bigger conversation outside the platform. One is to do with the competition. One is to do with LRNG. So I'm just noticing during this conversation that we have to make sure that that we're aware that there's some different applications here. So hopefully I didn't derail that a little bit. So back up here, and please in the chat box, if I have derailed that question, please clarify so I can ask it again to Tim and Gurley, and we can make sure that we got it answered. And then there's sort of a 2-part question here. Oh wait, maybe just a 1-part question. Is there such a thing as a user profile where badges are displayed, or is the intention that they bring them into other profiles? And this would be specific to the LRNG platform.
Yeah, so there is a user profile. Learners will have a dashboard and kind of a workspace where they can manage all of the different learning content that they're interacting with, as well as the evidence that they're submitting to complete XPs, to step through playlists and earn badges at the end of the playlist. And then, as I mentioned, they'll be able to curate the content that they're creating in their workspace into that sort of public-facing portfolio.
Okay. Sorry, I've got Mandy's doing an amazing job of moderating all your questions for me. So I'm just going through as they show up here on my screen. This is from Dan. For the competition, rather than have this summative achievement result in employment, could the XP playlist and badge be requirements of employment? I guess that's for us. I think that that's fairly broadly interpreted how you want to think about. This might be one of those situations where it's really open to interpretation. If you want the opportunity to work that way, if that's how you want the playlist to work and the conditions and criteria for the playlist, I think that is a design consideration for you, and does not have to be constrained by how any platform would treat it. There's no right answer, I guess, is the answer. And then I've got a couple questions here from Anne. The first one is, who at a local basis can then see students who earn badges at a local level? Is there an intermediary responsible for this, or is it the badge issuer?
So the main way that organizations will be able to see what badges were earned by what learners is through some of the data exports and sort of analytics and reports that are offered as part of the platform functionality. Those are tiered in sort of two levels. For cities that are operating on LRNG with network accounts, they'll be able to get a pretty significant sort of look into all of the learner data for all of the learners in their city. In addition to that, individual organizations will have reports about what learners are just interacting with their content. So most likely for the organizations as part of the DML competition, you'll be able to get reports and sort of analytics about all the learners that are interacting with your XPs, badges, and playlists. And then you'll be able to use that information to sort of do anything that you want, either to like analyze it and do your own reports and analytics, or potentially, you know, send rewards, unlock opportunities for those learners, et cetera, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Tim. We have a question here from Cal. Tim, is there an API for badges on LRNG so that his organization can trigger badge awards from another piece of software?
So the entire platform is sort of built on APIs. We haven't built any custom integrations using those APIs yet. You're specifically asking about the opportunity unlocking or opportunity access system or feature. That is a feature that we are researching right now and will be building over the next 3 to 6 months. So I'm excited to get lots of use cases and stories and questions from the DML community as to how you might use that feature. It's actually my job to think about exactly what that feature needs to do. So I've actually been spending time over the last couple of weeks talking to different partners about how they would use an opportunity unlocking feature. So it sounds like your requirement, which I will now add to my list, would be some sort of automatic unlocking via API integration to sort of open a gate on a third-party platform to allow the learner to access some additional content, software, etc.
And that's good to know, Tim. I have received some questions before about APIs. So if other people have questions about that, can they just direct them to you if they're not on this call or have not asked their question? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in general, the answer to that is that we haven't built any sort of public-facing API integrations yet, but we'll be considering those over the next year or so as sort of requests come in and we start to prioritize which ones make the most sense.
Okay, great. Here's a good question. This is from Haley. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. What is the badges relationship to Mozilla's open badging program? From the competition perspective, and I think from LRNG's perspective, the badges are all open, meaning that they are meant to be shared and displayed not just in the LRNG platform, but elsewhere. Students and youth, anyone who's earning them, can move them around the web with them. Tim, do you have any comments about that specific to the LRNG platform?
Sure. Yeah. So the open badges framework and sort of the data spec behind open badges, which was originally created by Mozilla, but is now sort of just owned by the open source community and supported by the Badge Alliance. So LRNG is a huge supporter of the Badge Alliance in terms of resourcing and work effort that we contribute to make sure that the open badges standard continues to improve. And we are working on having all of the badges within our platform be aligned with the Open Badges standard and be able to import and export badges to and from the platform to other platforms, to your desktop, building integrations, etc. So Open Badges is a huge priority for us, not only because they're our badges, but because if we want badges sort of universally to become more valuable, we recognize that we need to support the sort of universal standard of Open Badges.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the Mozilla Open Badges initiative was funded by the MacArthur Foundation, as well as LRNG and the DML competition. So Open Badges all around here, very deep. So we're pretty much on board, all of us, when we think about Open Badges, as opposed to what some people are referring to as digital badges that are not necessarily dipped in metadata and meant to be shared outside the platform where they were issued. So thank you for that question. I think we jumped in fairly deep into badges and assumed that there was at least a little bit of knowledge. So I will back up and just say earlier at the top of the chat, and maybe Mandy can add this again, there's some really nice case studies that are starting to come out, and we added some resources about that. There's a new book, Digital Badges in Education, that just came out with some great case studies, many from former grantees and people who've been doing excellent work, lots of really great discussion with empirical research in there. So there's that book. There's also Badge Alliance has some case studies, the Design Principles Documentation Project, all of those links I think Mandy has added to the chat box there. So if you need to go and steep yourself in some badge design background information, we've got some in there. And then there's the Open Badges Google groups, which is a great place to go ask questions about general badge design questions. So another question here from Leslie. We will probably have an extensive playlist, so 100 choices, and we're wondering if it will be accepted and if it will work to have individual learners choose, for example, 12 to 15 XPs within the playlist to earn a badge. And just want to say again, I'm going to direct this toward Tim about the LRNG platform. Your badge system can be much more sophisticated or elaborate or whatever you want it to be. You may already have one that's much more so in terms of the competition criteria. But Tim, do you want to answer about the LRNG platform?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We don't necessarily have a quantity limit on the number of XPs that can be contained within a playlist, although in our initial user testing with some of our youth and youth advisory groups, having too many badges is pretty overwhelming for learners, or sorry, not too many badges, too many XPs is too overwhelming for learners. So even like we tested it with, I think, maybe 16 XPs as part of one playlist, and they just kind of got lost in the wealth of content, and they weren't sure sort of where to start and seemed too overwhelming to even begin. So having 100 might be a little bit tricky, but maybe you could figure out a use case and a way to design that would work. The way that you could do what you're talking about, having 100 XPs but only requiring 12 of them, would be to use that mark as optional functionality that I showed, where you can choose which XPs are required in order to earn the badge and which ones aren't. So you could have kind of a wealth of 100 options. You could choose your own adventure and do whatever you wanted, but you would have to, just do the required ones, which could be 10, 12 out of that 100.
Great, thank you, Tim. Question from Simone, can the playlist for the competition be built directly on the LRNG platform? From our perspective, absolutely, and they can also be hosted elsewhere. You're free to move your content to other sites, your own organization if you choose. I do think it's really helpful to take a look at, Tim has done some other demos, and I think that's available on our resources page. And so it's good to see how that builder works in more detail. We sort of skipped over it very quickly, but those are good demos to do. And I don't know if you're doing another one, Tim, but if not, the archives are great. Lots of good questions and good to see how the builder works if you want to help that for framing your or chunking your content. And interestingly, just to go back to Tim, your comment about 16 being overwhelming. We found the same thing with badges as well. It's probably sort of the same thing. Too many badges can start to seem, I guess, unless you have a very talented game designer who sort of understands the sweet spot for a system, it can easily be too much, both on the admin side and also on the learner side as well.
And I just shared a link to the next demo in the chat. Just to call out, we're still fairly early in the development of the LRNG platform. Obviously, we sort of have the core functionality built and live already for our users, which I showed you, but lots of more features that we'll be building, like the opportunity unlocking system that I mentioned over the coming, 6 months and hopefully years. But each demo that I'll be doing probably right now will be on a monthly basis, and we'll just keep showing off new features that are being released, as well as sort of the rest of the platform. So feel free to come at the end of April, and then we'll have another one at the end of May, end of June, and so on.
Great. We have another sort of competition-based question here. This is from Leah. Are people expected to come in with a built-in audience in addition to the playlist ideas? And ideally, yes. The goal of the competition is to scale connected learning audiences and to broaden those experiences to new audiences. So as part of your application, you will be asked to provide a description of the local or global audiences that your existing connected learning programming or content currently serves. So you'll need to explain clearly, and this is in the language from the competition, you'll be asked to explain clearly how a playlist will broaden that reach. And you'll indicate what new audiences will be engaged, and if applicable, what opportunities will be unlocked, as we were talking about a little bit earlier.
And just to expand on that, I think one of the benefits of being part of the DML competition is that you get access to use an LRNG account, and all of the winners will have content that will probably feature nationally on the sort of national LRNG feed. So yes, having a pre-existing audience is obviously good, but one of the benefits that we hope of being part of the LRNG sort of ecosystem and movement is that you'll be able to showcase your content to a broader audience as well, and really sort of share it out, not only to all of our partner cities, of which we have 12 now, but also to sort of the national audience that's going to lrng.org.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of add to that, we're very excited. I've worked with DML grantees for the last 8 years, and the opportunity to see what everybody is doing all in one place, just even from my perspective, not even working directly with youth, I think it's going to be very exciting and very creative and inspiring just to see it, even though you know that it's happening and you've heard about it, to actually see it. It's going to be very exciting. So I guess I'm saying good luck to everybody. I hope we get a chance to see all of your content, because usually they're amazing programs and very, very inspiring. So moving on to the next question here from Cheryl: how accessible is the LRNG platform to users of assistive technology?
What was the question?
How accessible is the LRNG platform to users of assistive technology?
Got it. I think because the platform is still in its nascency, we haven't built out a lot of functionality like embedded linked semantic metadata to all of our content fields in order for them to be read by like different machine readable software programs that would be used by assistive technologies. So it's sort of bare bones right now in terms of really doubling down on support for that. Although it is something we have on the roadmap to consider for the future. I think it's important for us right now to make sure that we sort of have the foundational idea for the technology right and working before we invest a lot of resources in what are actually pretty tricky implementations for the platform.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Okay, I got a big one here from Mark. In the past, I'm reading from Mark's question directly. In the past, I think some of the community has seen the competition as a sort of experiment. For example, can we show some validity to the idea of badges for interesting affordances in learning through these talented grantees? And he's referring to the badges for lifelong learning in 2012. this competition, speaking about this current one, the playlist one, is hard because it's hard to tell what we're trying to prove or iterate on it. Is it the idea that the web can bundle learning experiences with greater spread and adoption? Is it that by using a common language called playlist, it catalyzes stronger partnerships across organizations? Is it that we're experimenting with playlists as a template to spread connected learning? It's a long question. I get it if we don't have time. Okay, yeah. So the answer is yes. So we'll move on to the next one. No, I'm just kidding. It's a watershed moment for us. It's a tipping point to take this big vision that we've been working on for many, many years. And many of you may feel like you've been working on a little piece of it here, a little piece of it there. And this is a chance to try and bring all of those together, including badges and chunking the content in a really innovative way with playlists, which I think Gurley is going to be very involved in helping understand it and describe it and figure out what works best in framing this learning content going forward. And anybody who is going to come on board as a competition grantee is going to be very big part of that as well. So it's all of those things, and that's probably why it feels confusing, is that you really have to keep all of them in mind. But the more you know about the DML work, the more you read about the connected learning research agenda, and are familiar with all of the different competitions that we funded, the more you can see the kind of intellectual vision that we've been working on for the last 10 years. So we're exploring playlists as a tool for scale, particularly with connected learning. It's about closing the opportunity gap. It's about broadening the reach. And so it really is about all of it. I don't mean to make it sound like it's that simple, because I realize there's a lot packed into that. But yes, for those of you who are coming into this conversation, maybe this is the first DML competition that you've thought about applying for. There are breadcrumbs around the web. Looking at the past competition, looking at the connected learning research agenda, I think is probably the best framing for what it is that connected learning is about. All of those things are going to help bring together a strong proposal.
And to build on that, I think at the very high level, right, we've been talking about this idea called connected learning. But I think what we've been lacking are tools and software to actually connect learning, right? To build connections across a lot of discrete learning elements in the connected learning ecosystem, right? How do we connect digital learning resources to local ones? How do we connect a bunch of those sort of stitched together to a credential or an achievement that actually matters? How do we connect learning opportunities across multiple organizations and online sort of at the same time? And then, as Cheryl mentioned, how do we connect all of that to career or future, academic or learning opportunities, unlocking something, right, that sort of comes next. So for me, the playlist is like a tool, a hypothesis of a tool that we can use to build the connections between otherwise sort of fragmented learning objects in the ecosystem. One really exciting thing for me as a specific example, right, is that there's been a lot of hypothetical work around learning pathways, learning paths. So a great example is the state of Ohio. I think the State Department of Education created a number of learning pathway documents, these sort of beautiful PDFs that sketch out what one's learning pathway might be if one wanted to achieve a certain career path, right? And so it sketched out all of the sort of different learning opportunities you might have to do in order to become a nurse or become an occupational therapist, or all these sort of different learning paths. But it was a purely hypothetical document, right? It was saying one would do this type of learning opportunity if one could find that learning opportunity, which is useful. But I think for me, playlists are a tool to operationalize that and not just talk about a hypothetical learning path that one could do if one found the resources, but actually calling out specifically actionable opportunities in a path, in a playlist, that will lead to the opportunity if you do these opportunities, if you do this learning content that's in the list. So for me, the hypothesis is what happens when we move from the hypothetical learning path of paths we think exist and might work for people to a path that a learner can act on in the context of a playlist.
Yeah, it's a big question. What is the point of the competition? What is the point of LRNG? What is the point of connected learning? That's what the whole community is built around. So I hope people will continue continue to have this question, discuss this question with us. The next question here, asked earlier, Evan, we're finally getting to you here. Can someone expand on the proposal criteria of how learning will be validated and assessed in relation to the organization creating the playlist and the local context in which they will be used? Is there an expectation that the organization creating the playlist would be validating and assessing the learning that takes place through people engaging with the playlist? I'm going to answer that on behalf of the competition. Then I think, Gurley, this might be a good question for you. From our perspective, this is, again, one of those broad questions. It's open to interpretation in terms of your proposal, how you would like to do it, whether you want it to be your organization or whether you want to outsource it, or exactly how you're going to handle it depending on what you are proposing. But is there anything in the platform or how you're thinking about it, Gurley, that and I hopefully that question made sense to you. If you need me to repeat it, I'd be happy to.
No, right. You know, we, consistent with what you just said, we're taking also a broad view. We are, for our national global playlist, for instance, we're doing a combination of outsourcing some of the assessment to the National Writing Project, for instance, some expert teachers, as well as the in-house team that will be doing the assessment. And that's actually we will be the assessors who will determine whether or not badges are being issued. Now, in terms of empirically determining whether or not these assessments and the badges and all the claims and that evidentiary chain is actually valid and leads to the sort of opportunities that we're looking for, some of that empirical activity is we've got some proposals and plans in place to start actually doing that on our end. And I'm guessing from the competition side, it would be up to the proposer's, I guess, decision, right, or choice if how extensive they want to go down that validation hole.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So.
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's actually a big thing in the badge community. Is to pay really close attention to how you're going to do that, and try not to end up in the weeds, because I think it is possible if you're trying to assess competencies that you have thought through how many outside mentor, expert, if peers, if that's how you're going to do it. It is kind of the wicked design problem that can go along with badges.
It might be helpful to sketch out a few of the ways that we're thinking about it being done over the coming summer, right? So I think that there's the possibility for some national content, like the GAP playlist, for instance, to be assessed at the national level, right, by like a single organization who's taking submissions from learners across the country and sort of doing that all in one place digitally. There's also the possibility to create playlists and content that are intended to be used on the ground in person in real world programs, right? So potentially you create a playlist that you don't actually intend for people to use in a solely digital format, but you intend to be used on the ground by organizations in cities, sort of offering it up as like a curriculum option to be employed in cities across the country. Like I know there are folks at the Smithsonian that are prototyping something like that this summer, where they're creating some national content that'll be employed on the ground in person with real teachers. And so in that case, the assessment would be done by those in-person facilitators, sort of at the micro level, different facilitators in different programs across the country versus the sort of national level assessment. So a number of different options there, as well as potentially, the choice to choose how deep you're going in terms of the assessment and how sort of like automatic to some degree you want to be in terms of awarding the badge at the end of the playlist.
Yeah, I think the best thing is to recognize that part of the badge system design has made people who are expert in assessment rock stars in our community. The thing that you hated to do in school is now connected to a very fascinating conversation. So if you can find somebody like Gurley or somebody at your local university, or even if you put a question on the Open Badges Google group, I think you'll start up a pretty interesting conversation. So again, this is a much broader conversation that actually touches even outside the competition and as well as LRNG. So it's part of what makes this whole new initiative very fascinating. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I think we have 2 questions here, so we're going to try and get through those. And again, the questions that we did not get to that came in beforehand, I may share with Gurley and Tim, and we can get some quick typed responses to those, and we'll put those out with the archive if we can, or might have to do that following up next week. The next one is from Anne. Can you give an example of what a local playlist evidence might be and how or who submits evidence between providers and youth? A local playlist might represent multiple partners, true, in and out of school, and who at a local basis can then see students who earn badges at a local level. Is there an intermediary responsible for it, or is it the badge issuer? So I think there's a bunch of stuff to unpack in there. I think the general answer to that goes back to what we were just saying, that there's a lot of different considerations in terms of how you do it, that are really not limited by the platform or the competition. But Gurley and Tim, if you have any specific things that you want to say about how it might work with LRNG, please feel free to jump in.
Well, a concrete example that we actually give in our handbook is, for instance, in having a local soccer camp, possibly have their coaches do the assessment themselves, align with what Tim was saying, where you may have local people actually conducting the assessment. Now, what you would do is in that XP, where in the little section that says show and prove, you may require the youth to submit some sort of verification from that coach, for instance, that you have, you have successfully completed the 100 drills you were supposed to within this X amount of time, right? So it would, as of now, it's still on the youth's, it still falls on the youth to actually submit the proof. But as a playlist creator, you can describe that. You can describe what needs to happen on a local level, and just figure out how to translate that so that an actual artifact can be submitted and can then thus be displayed in the badge assertion page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what Gurley is calling out there, right, is that the assessment can happen offline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you even get on the platform. And then in terms of the show and prove section, you just say, assessment's good, it already happened offline, coach said it was awesome, no worries. Or it can happen online, where the learner is submitting the evidence firsthand, and then it's being assessed through the platform. So 2 ways to do it. The other way that I'll mention is that we'll be building a feature called group management, which will allow you to create groups of learners and or see entire groups of learners who are working on a single playlist and do some sort of approvals or issuing in sort of large groups or sort of in bulk. So say you were working with a group of 30 students on the ground, you had done all the assessment with them in person, right? Say they had to do some sort of like show and prove in person at soccer camp, right? As part of the last day of camp, all of them did it. You sort of checked it off on your piece of paper, and then you went online, use the group management tool to check off the boxes for all of them and submit, a proud photo of all of them or a 2-minute video of their like drill session or whatever it is as evidence for the entire group. So there are ways to make it a lot simpler to do the assessment and evidence submission process, although there are trade-offs, right, between sort of the quality, uniqueness, and depth of the evidence submitted and attached to the badge versus the time and efficiency, as with all things in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Slower is deeper and better, and faster is quicker but not as high quality.
We do have 1 minute left, so I think we're going to probably go over by a minute or two. Tim and Gurley, I hope that's okay. I hope you are able to squeeze that in. I do want to say, for people who are just coming into the badge conversation, I know this sounds like a plug. I wrote a chapter in the book that just came out, but we don't get any money from it. But I just finished reading the book, and there's such great information in there. It feels like some excellent synthesis of a lot of the thinking about the number of badges and some of this that just goes to Anne's question that was asked in some of the earlier ones. So if you can go to your university, you might be able to request it there so you don't have to pay for it. It's strangely very expensive. Anyway, there's some really good information in there about badge design. We have time for one more question. hopefully it has a quick response, and then we'll do a quick wrap. This is from Andy. Andy loves the background images that were shown when you were doing your demo, Tim. However, are they required? I'm a bit worried about some of our smaller nonprofits that may not have the talent or resources to create the images and videos, and I'm also worried about poor quality images being used. Any thoughts on how to manage this as a network administrator?
Cool. Yeah. As a network admin, I think it's super important to do some curation, and/or we're providing tons of good training resources, the handbook, knowledge base, all of those things to support partners and their network of subsidiary partners to make sure their content is of good quality. If you don't upload any banner image at all, we actually have some really cool default images that our designers have created. So that's sort of the worst case scenario, is you have a somewhat generic but attractive image that it just kind of works for any piece of content. But really, it's not too big of a deal. Like if you can take a photo with your smartphone that looks somewhat nice, that should be high enough resolution to show on the platform. But yeah, it's really any photo, any image will work, any stock photo, and we're publishing a lot of resources to support that as part of the work. And videos, of course, are also an option. A great thing about the video option, as well as the photo option, is it doesn't necessarily have to be content that you created, right? You could go on and find something on YouTube or on Vimeo or any Creative Commons licensed image and just upload it into the platform. So it doesn't have to be content that you created yourself, just something that matches up with the learning opportunity.
Great. I am so sorry, everyone. We are over. I know we missed a couple questions. We will try and get to those in the coming week. Thank you to everybody for this great conversation, Tim and Gurley. And mark your calendars, April 27th, 12 to 12:30 for the next office hours with Jen Humke and David Theo Goldberg to talk about the competition. And also May 5th from 1:30 to 2. We'll be hosting these additional office hours, hashtag DML playlists, and we'll see you online. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.